Seagulls circled the terrace, their cries like laughter, sharp and insincere, like my daughter's smile. I sat in a wicker chair, sipped strong tea, and watched the ocean. 67 is the age when you begin to appreciate serenity, but it was still missing in my life. Costa Mesa became my home 35 years ago. A small coastal town in California, quiet enough to grow old in, and vibrant enough to not feel buried alive. My house stood on a small hill overlooking the ocean, a memory of a time when working as a marine safety inspector brought in a decent income. Now retired, I watched the sea without professional interest, but the habit of assessing danger was still there. The phone vibrated on the table. Yolanda, again. The third call in a week, an unusually high frequency for a daughter who usually remembered my existence once a month, or even less often. Daddy? Are you home? I'll be by in half an hour with that pie you like. I didn't like any pie, especially the ones she called my favorite, but I nodded as if she could see me. Dash, dash. Sure, come over. Putting the phone down, I got up and headed for the office. With 10 minutes before Yolanda arrived, I needed to check on a few things. The study was the darkest room in the house, the heavy curtains, the floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, the solid oak desk. Behind one of the bookshelves lurked a safe. I pushed aside the third volume of the Nautical Encyclopedia and entered the combination. The safe opened with a quiet click. The contents of the safe were exactly as I'd left it a week ago, after I'd discovered the theft. 3 things were missing: my father's gold watch, my late wife Anna's pearl necklace, and a small box containing her rings. Yolanda probably thought I hadn't noticed the missing items. After all, don't all old people get absent-minded? Don't they all start forgetting where they put things? I closed the safe and put the book back where it belonged. Yolanda didn't know that I kept an inventory of everything in the safe, with pictures and descriptions, a habit of a man who had worked 30 years in security. Nor did she know about the second safe, hidden in the basement, where the really important things were kept: documents, cash, and my will, which still listed her as an heiress. When I returned to the terrace, Yolanda's silver Ford was already in the driveway. She got out of the car holding a box of pie from the local bakery. She was wearing a light blue dress, her hair gathered in a careless bun, and a wide smile on her face. A smile that never reached her eyes. "Daddy, you look great." Yolanda came up the terrace steps and kissed me on the cheek. She smelled of expensive perfume. "You too," I replied, taking the box of pie. "What brings you here today? Do I need an excuse to visit my own father?" She laughed, but there was something strained in her laugh. "I just thought we could spend some time together. I've been so busy lately with work." Yolanda worked as an exterminator for a company that catered to the wealthy homes of Newport Beach. Not the kind of career kids dream of, but she seemed to enjoy talking about millionaires whose homes were infested with termites or ants. A little revenge on the privileged, as she once put it. "How's work? Still poisoning cockroaches in rich people's homes?" I asked, cutting the pie. "It's fine," she answered quickly. "Too fast. But I don't want to talk about work. You know, I was thinking, it's been so long since we've spent time together." "Really?" I put a piece of pie on my plate and looked at her. At 31, Yolanda was an attractive woman with sharp facial features inherited from her mother. But there was something cold, calculating in her eyes. Something Anna didn't have. "And what do you suggest?" She looked away for a moment, as if gathering her thoughts. "I rented a boat for this weekend. Thought we could go out to sea like old times. Remember when I was little and you used to take me out on inspections?" I remembered. Those were the rare moments when we were really close. I showed her how to check life-saving equipment, taught her how to read the weather from clouds and waves. But then there was the sinking ship incident, and Yolanda found herself witnessing me trying to rescue the crew. 3 survived, 2 drowned. After that, she never wanted to go to sea again. Said she was afraid of the water. "You're afraid of the water," I reminded her. "I was 9 years old, Dad. People change." She smiled, covering my hand with hers. "Besides, who better to protect me from the dangers of the ocean than a former marine safety inspector?" There was flattery in her words, but also something else. Something insincere. I'd learned to sense danger in my 30 years on the job, and now my internal radar was sounding alarms. I thought back to the last few weeks. Yolanda had started showing up more often, always with gifts or offers of help. She even offered to organize a house cleaning, a thing she had never done before. It was probably during this cleaning that the items from the safe had been stolen. Now she was offering a boat trip. Yolanda, who always said she hated the ocean. Sounds like fun, I replied, deciding to play along. When do you want to go? This Saturday. I've rented a small boat. Nothing too complicated. We could leave in the morning, spend the day at sea, and be back by sunset. Saturday's fine. Yolanda shone, and for a second I saw in her the little girl who had once sat on my lap while I told her about the constellations by which sailors navigated the night sea. But the illusion quickly faded. We spent another hour talking about nothing. Yolanda asked about my health, how I was doing at home, whether I needed help with my finances. She was especially insistent about my savings and insurance. You know, Dad, she said as she was about to leave, I was thinking that maybe you should think about selling the house. It's too big for one person, and stairs might be a problem at your age. I'm only 67, Yolanda. I go up and down those stairs 20 times a day. Now, yes, but in 5 years? 10 years from now? She shook her head. I'm just worried about you. Worried. Interesting word for what I saw in her eyes. It wasn't concern, it was calculation. When she left, I stayed sitting on the terrace, looking out at the ocean. The sun was already setting, coloring the water orange and purple. Beautiful and dangerous, like so much in this world, including my daughter. I pulled out my phone and opened the banking app. My credit card had been charged several unusual charges over the past month. Restaurants more expensive than Yolanda could afford, jewelry store purchases, hotel reservations in Mexico. The card I gave her was for emergencies only. Apparently her idea of emergencies was quite broad. Sighing, I blocked the card and headed inside. I needed to get ready for Saturday's walk. Something told me it wasn't going to be as idyllic as Yolanda had described. The next morning I called my old friend Barton Pierce, owner of a marine hardware store in the harbor. Whitney, haven't heard from you in a while, old seawolf. How's life on land? Boring, but safe, I replied. Listen, I need a couple things. Nothing special, just going for a walk with my daughter. Yolanda, I could hear the surprise in Bart's voice. I thought she was afraid of water. People change, I echoed my daughter's words. Dash, dash, Bart said. What do you need? A waterproof GPS tracker, small enough to hide in your clothes. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Whitney, is everything okay? Sounds like you're expecting trouble. I smiled, looking at the picture of Anna standing on the mantel. She died 10 years ago, but sometimes I still talk to her, asked her advice. I wonder what she would say now. She'd probably tell me to give Yolanda another chance. Anna was always an optimist. I'm a realist. Just a precaution, Bart. Old habit. Well, come by this afternoon. I'll pick something up for you. After the call, I sat down at my desk and started writing. A police report on the theft from the safe, dated yesterday afternoon. I wasn't going to file it now, but I might need it later. Then I wrote a letter to my lawyer with the changes to the will. Yolanda was still listed as the heir, but now with certain conditions. That evening, returning from Bart's with a small waterproof box in my pocket, I sat in a chair overlooking the ocean and thought about how Yolanda and I had come to this point. When exactly had something broken between us? Maybe it started with Anna's death? Or earlier, when I spent more time at work than at home? Or maybe I'd always been a bad father, just didn't want to admit it. Anna used to say that I was too hard on Yolanda, that I expected perfection from her that didn't exist. Maybe she was right. But does strictness justify stealing? Do a father's mistakes give his daughter the right to betray him? The phone vibrated, a message from Yolanda confirming our 9 a.m. Saturday meeting at the harbor. I replied with a short, "I'll be there," and put the phone away. The ocean outside the window was beginning to darken, turning from blue to almost black. I knew there were dangers lurking beneath its surface that most people didn't even realize were there. Currents that could drag a swimmer a mile from shore, deep holes where the water suddenly turned cold. Sea creatures whose bites and poisons could kill in minutes. I knew all this and more. I knew how to behave when confronted by a shark, how to identify an approaching storm by the nature of the waves, how to find safe passages between reefs. Yolanda may have forgotten who I was before I retired, or, more likely, she underestimated me because of my age. It's a typical mistake of the young to think that not only do people lose strength with age, but that they forget skills acquired over decades. Well, Saturday would show which of us would be more prepared for the unexpected. Saturday came all too quickly. I woke up before dawn as the sky outside my window was just beginning to turn gray. Old habits die hard. 30 years of getting up at 5 in the morning hadn't gone to waste. Naval service had taught me to appreciate the early hours, when the world was still quiet and I could think without disturbance. Lying in bed, I listened to the sounds of the house. The creak of the floorboards as the wind picked up, the quiet hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of the surf coming in through the closed windows. This house has witnessed the best and worst moments of my life. This is where Anna and I raised Yolanda. This is where I held my wife's hand when she was dying of cancer. Our bedroom hasn't changed since then. I wouldn't let Yolanda get rid of Anna's things, even though my daughter insisted it would help me move on. The photos on the dresser, her books on the shelves, the closet of clothes I sometimes touch just to feel the fabric under my fingers. Today required special preparation. I got up, showered, and dressed in my old fishing clothes, faded blue shorts, a white t-shirt, and a worn cap with the Marine Security Service logo on it. Under the t-shirt, I wore a thin neoprene vest. Not a full wetsuit, but enough to provide extra protection from the cold of the water and sunburn. Before heading down to the kitchen, I pulled the waterproof box Bart had given me from the bedside table. Inside was a coin-sized GPS tracker with a small carabiner. I clipped it to the inside waistband of my shorts and checked my phone. The app showed my exact location. Then I sewed a small waterproof pouch with a spare phone, credit card, and cash into the inside pocket of my shorts. While the coffee brewed, I stood at the window looking out at the ocean. The day promised to be clear, with a light breeze, perfect conditions for a boat ride. The waves were low, the sky clear. The weather on the coast could change quickly, but today there was no sign of an impending storm. My thoughts returned to Anna. We met when I was 25 and she was 22. I was just starting my career with the Maritime Security Service, and she was working in a small bookstore near the harbor. Anna loved the sea as much as I did, though in a different way. For me, the ocean was work. For her, it was poetry. She could sit on the shore for hours, writing something in her notebook, watching the waves. The sea remembers everything, Whitney, she used to say. Every ship, every drowned sailor, every tear shed. It remembers and forgives. It remembers and forgives. I wonder if the sea remembered everyone I failed to save during my years of service. Did it remember those 2 sailors from the Aurora who drowned in front of 9-year-old Yolanda? I could still see their faces in my dreams. A young lad, almost a boy, and an elderly bosun. They didn't swim out, though I dived after them again and again until I was pulled out almost unconscious. Yolanda was screaming on the shore then. It was the only time I ever saw her really afraid for me. There was real terror in her eyes. After that incident, she refused to go near the water. No amount of persuasion helped. Anna said I should respect her fear, not force her, and I agreed, even though I believed that indulging fears only strengthened them. Now, 22 years later, Yolanda suddenly wanted to go to sea, with me, to drink coffee and think about death. Something to do on a Saturday morning. At 8:30, I was already at the harbor. I parked the car and walked leisurely to the wharf, where Yolanda had said there would be a boat waiting for us. The marina was quiet. A few fishermen were preparing their gear. A couple of boaters were checking their gear. I noticed a boat, which appeared to be the one Yolanda had rented. A small motorboat, powerful enough for coastal cruising, but not for going out on the open ocean. I stepped closer to examine the vessel. At first glance, everything was fine. The hull with no visible damage. The motor looked serviced. There was the standard life-saving equipment on board: vests, life preservers, and flares. I looked in the deckhouse. Simple controls, radio, compass. No navigation system, but coastal navigation didn't require one. Inspecting? Yolanda's voice caught me by surprise. She was standing on the dock, dressed in her new yachting outfit, white shorts and a blue short-sleeved shirt. She wore a wide-brimmed hat on her head and sunglasses over her eyes. In her hands, she held a large bag. "Professional habit," I said, turning to her. "You look like a real sailor." "I had to prepare myself," she smiled. "I couldn't go out to sea in ordinary clothes." I noticed that despite her smile, she was nervous. Her fingers were gripping the strap of her bag too tightly, and there were dark circles under her eyes that even sunglasses couldn't hide. "What's in the bag?" I asked. "Food, drinks, sunscreen." She shrugged. "Everything you need for a picnic on the water." She climbed aboard and walked to the deck house where she placed the bag on the seat. I noticed her pause for a moment, looking out at the water, and inhaled deeply, as if gathering her wits. "Are you sure you want to do this?" I asked. "If you're still afraid of the water—" "I'm not afraid," she said sharply. "I told you, people change." I nodded, not wanting to argue. Instead, I checked the fuel supply and made sure the engine was starting properly. Everything was fine, which was a little suspicious. Usually the rented boats always had minor malfunctions. Worn markings on the instruments, frayed ropes, clogged injectors. This one looked too good to be a rental. "Who owns the boat?" I asked as we pulled away from the marina. "The rental company at the harbor," Yolanda answered without looking me in the eye. "Why do you ask?" "Just curious." "Too good a condition for a rental boat." "I picked the best I could find." She smiled strainedly. "Only the best for my father." I nodded and concentrated on getting the boat out of the harbor. It felt good to feel the steering wheel under my fingers again, to feel the boat respond to the slightest movement. It was like riding a bicycle, once learned, never forgotten. When we were over the breakwater, I steered the boat parallel to the shore. Yolanda was sitting on the bow, facing the sea, the wind ruffling her hair. For a moment I saw in her the little girl who had once looked out at the ocean with rapt attention from the deck of a patrol boat. Before that day with the Aurora. "Where are we going?" I asked, raising my voice to overpower the noise of the engine and the wind. She turned around, shielding her eyes from the sun. "I thought we might go along the coast and then out into the open sea a bit. You know these waters better than I do." I nodded and steered the boat a little farther offshore. We passed the beaches of Costa Mesa, then passed a small cove where I often fished on weekends. The ocean was calm, with only a slight ripple rocking the boat. After half an hour, Yolanda suggested we stop for lunch. I shut off the engine and we dropped a small anchor. The shore was visible, but as a thin strip on the horizon. The blue ocean stretched around us, interrupted only by the occasional passing ship in the distance. Yolanda took sandwiches, fruit, and a thermos of coffee out of her bag. We sat in the stern, arranging the food on a small table. "How often do you go out to sea now?" she asked, handing me a sandwich. "Once a month, maybe," I answered. "Sometimes I rent a boat for fishing. Sometimes I just sit on the shore and watch the waves." "How's Mom?" There was an unexpected softness in her voice. "Yes," I nodded. "Like your mother." We were silent for a moment, each absorbed in our own thoughts. Anna had always been the link between us. Under her, we tried to be better than we really were. After she died, that bond weakened and then disappeared. "I miss her," Yolanda said quietly. "I miss her too," I answered without looking at my daughter. "Every day." "Have you ever thought of starting over? Meeting someone?" I shook my head. "No, some things only happen once in a lifetime." Yolanda finished her coffee and put the cup on the table. "You know I found Mom's jewelry in your safe." I froze before I could get the sandwich to my mouth. "There it is." "Yeah, I know, you took it." She turned to me, a look of surprise in her eyes that quickly changed to something akin to guilt, but only for a moment. "I didn't take them. I just looked. They're still there." "No, they're not. My father's watch, your mother's pearl necklace, and the ring box. It's all gone." Yolanda shook her head. "You must have forgotten where you put them. At your age, that's normal." My age has nothing to do with my memory," I replied calmly. "And I know exactly where those things were and where they disappeared too." She turned away, looking at the horizon. "I don't know what you're talking about." I decided not to insist. Instead, I asked, "Why did you bring me here, Yolanda?" "Really?" She turned to me, a smile on her face that didn't reach her eyes. "I told you, I wanted to spend time together. We see each other so rarely, and I thought—" "You never wanted to spend time with me," I interrupted her, "even when your mother was alive, especially after she died." Yolanda pressed her lips into a thin line. "Maybe I decided to change, fix our relationship before it's too late." "Or maybe you need something," I suggested. "Something other than Mom's jewelry." She stood up abruptly, nearly knocking over the table. "I told you I didn't take it." I watched her, noting the way her hands shook, the way she avoided my gaze. Yolanda had always been a bad liar. Anna said she'd inherited it from me, the inability to hide the truth behind false words. Let's change the subject, I suggested, deciding to back off for now. Tell me about your work. How are things going with the extermination of cockroaches in the rich? Yolanda visibly relaxed and sat down again. Same old, same old. Lots of work, little appreciation. Last week I was working on some tech mogul's house. You should have seen the villa, like a spaceship landing on a hill. And there are ants inside. She went on about her clients, and I listened, half listening, watching her hands, which now and then reached for the bag, as if checking something. What could be in there? A weapon? It was unlikely. More likely some of my papers she wanted me to sign. A will? Power of attorney? After lunch, Yolanda suggested we move farther offshore. I agreed, started the engine, and steered the boat into the open sea. She sat next to me in the wheelhouse, with her bag on her lap. I wanted to talk to you, she began when the shore was almost out of sight, about your house and finances. Here it was. I nodded, keeping my gaze on the horizon. I'm listening. You're getting older, Dad, and the house is too big for you alone. I was thinking, maybe you could move into an assisted living facility. There's medical staff there, other people your age. I'm not going to move, Anasha replied, and I'm only 67. I don't need medical staff. But you will, she insisted. Maybe not now, but in a few years. And wouldn't it be better to be prepared? Sell the house while the real estate market is booming? And where would the money from the sale go? She shrugged her shoulders as if the question were irrelevant. To support you, of course, a good nursing home. Maybe for the traveling you've always dreamed of. I've never dreamed of traveling. I've spent my whole life on one stretch of coast, and I've been content with that. Yolanda knew that. And who's going to manage that money? You? She looked away. I could help you with the finances. I have experience. Experience with what? Spending my money on restaurants and jewelry stores? Yolanda flinched as if I'd hit her. I don't know what you're talking about. The credit card you used last month. The one for emergencies. She blushed but quickly pulled herself together. It was temporary. I was having financial difficulties, and I was going to pay the money back. If you just told me you'd noticed, you would have made up some story, I finished for her. I always do. We were silent. The boat was breaking the waves, moving farther and farther away from the shore. I checked the fuel supply enough to make it back without a problem, even if we traveled a few more miles. Yolanda opened her bag and took out a folder of documents. I've prepared something, she said, holding it out to me. Just take a look at it. These are offers from several good nursing homes and an estimate of the value of your house from a realtor. I took the folder and opened it. Indeed, there were glossy brochures of nursing homes and a sheet with an appraisal of my house. But among those documents, I noticed other things. A copy of my life insurance policy, where Yolanda was the sole beneficiary, and a draft of a power of attorney authorizing her to administer all of my assets in the event of my incapacity. Incapacity, I said aloud. That's an interesting word. It's standard wording, she said quickly, in case you get sick or you can't make decisions. And who's going to determine whether I can make decisions? She shrugged, trying to look nonchalant. The doctors, of course. It's all standard paperwork, Dad. Any lawyer will tell you they're a must-have. I nodded and continued looking through the papers. Among them were the papers for the boat. Not the lease, but the purchase. The vessel had been purchased 2 weeks ago in Yolanda's name. The payment was made on my credit card. So you bought the boat, I said, showing her the document. Not rented. She was confused for a moment, but quickly pulled herself together. Yes, I did. I wanted to surprise you. It's your boat. A gift from me. Paid for on my credit card. I was going to return the money, she said stubbornly. I just didn't have enough for the down payment, and I thought that I wouldn't notice a charge of a few $1,000s. I shook my head. You always thought I was dumber than I am, Yolanda. She looked at me, and there was something between anger and fear in her eyes. I knew that look. It was the way she'd looked when I'd caught her lying as a child about uncompleted homework, about forbidden parties, about petty thefts from her mother's purse. You're always like this, she finally said, always suspecting the worst. I'm trying to help you, and you accuse me of some fraud. I'm not accusing, I said calmly. I'm just stating the facts. You took things from my safe. You used my credit card without authorization. You bought a boat with my money and lied about it. And now you want me to sign documents giving you control of my finances. Yolanda stood up abruptly, rocking the boat. You're insufferable, she shouted. You've always been like this. Controlling, suspicious, cold. No wonder Mom was unhappy with you. It wasn't true and we both knew it. Anna was never unhappy with me. We had difficulties like any couple, but we loved each other to the very end. But Yolanda always rewrote history to justify her actions. Your mother loved me, I said quietly, and she loved you. She would have been disappointed to see what you were trying to do. Yolanda turned pale, then red with anger. You don't know anything, she shouted. You've always thought only of yourself, about your work, your discipline, your rules. Never about me. I remained silent, looking at her. At that moment, she seemed like a stranger to me. Not my daughter, not a part of Anna and me, but someone completely foreign. I deserve this, she continued, lowering her voice. After everything I've been through with you, after all the times you refused to help me, I deserve this house, this money. I'm your only daughter. Blood doesn't give you a right to my money, I replied. And it certainly doesn't give you the right to steal from me. She laughed, but there was no mirth in her laugh. Steal? That's not stealing. It's an inheritance. It'll all be mine when you die anyway. I turned off the engine. We were far from shore, no other boats in sight, just the vast ocean and the two of us. I felt the tracker in the waistband of my shorts heat up slightly, a sign that it was working, sending a signal. Time to head back, I said. This walk was a mistake. Yolanda looked at me, and something in her gaze changed. The fear was gone, only cold determination. Yes, she agreed. It was a mistake. She took a step toward me, and I instinctively backed away, feeling the boat rock under my feet. The sun was high, its rays reflecting off the surface of the water in thousands of glittering shards. At another time, I would have enjoyed the sight, but now my thoughts were occupied with my daughter, standing before me with an expression on her face I had never seen before. There wasn't an ounce of love or affection in it, just cold calculation. Maybe we should talk, I suggested, trying to break the tension. Let's go back to shore and discuss it calmly. Yolanda shook her head slowly, not taking her eyes off me. It's too late to talk, Papa. It's too late. She stepped toward me again, and the boat rocked slightly. I held tightly to the handrail, feeling every muscle in my body tense in anticipation of the inevitable. Don't do anything stupid, I warned. Whatever you're thinking of doing will only make things worse. Yolanda laughed, a harsh, unpleasant sound, not at all like the little girl I'd once taught to tie nautical knots. Nonsense? She repeated. No, Daddy, it's not stupidity. It's a solution to a problem that had been ruining my life for far too long. She turned away and headed toward the deck house where her bag lay. I watched her every move tensely, ready for anything to happen. She pulled a bottle of water out of her bag and took a sip, then offered it to me. Would you like some? It's a hot day. I shook my head, not wanting to approach her or take anything from her hands. Yolanda shrugged and returned the bottle to her bag. You know, she said, looking at the horizon, I always thought the sea would take you away. After that Aurora thing, I was sure that one day you wouldn't come back from another raid. Every time you went out on patrol, I imagined your funeral. Her words hit me harder than any physical blow. I'd never suspected that my daughter was thinking about my death while I was risking my life saving others. I didn't know, I replied quietly. Of course you didn't. Yolanda turned to me, tears glistening in her eyes. You never knew anything about me. What I felt, what I dreamed, what I feared. You were busy saving other people's lives, and mine passed you by. There was a truth in what she said that I couldn't deny. I was really consumed with work, often absent, and when I was home I kept my distance, unable to express my feelings. Anna made up for my emotional coldness with her warmth, but after her death, there was only a gulf between my daughter and me. I did the best I could, I said. Maybe not as well as I should have, but I tried. You tried? Yolanda grinned bitterly. Remember my graduation? You didn't come because you were in some kind of security meeting. And my 21st birthday? You sent a card and a check because you were at a conference in San Diego. And when I divorced Paul, you didn't even call to check on me. I could argue that I didn't go to the graduation because I was rescuing a sinking yacht with a family of 4 on board that day. That on her 21st birthday, I was investigating a ferry crash that claimed 16 lives. That I hadn't called since her divorce because she'd told me to stay out of her personal life. But what was the point of explaining? You can't change the past. I'm sorry, I said simply. You're sorry? Yolanda shook her head. It's too late for regrets, Papa. Too late for everything. She walked to the edge of the boat and looked down at the water. You know what I see when I look at the ocean? Not beauty, not majesty like you do. I see the monster that almost took you when I was 9. The monster who was always more important to you than me. She turned to me, and in her eyes I saw something akin to pity. But today I made friends with that monster. And you know what? It turns out he and I have a lot in common. I realized what was about to happen a split second before she lunged at me. Despite my age, my reflexes were still sharp. I managed to dodge, and Yolanda flew past, nearly falling overboard herself. She cursed, regained her balance, and turned to me again. Don't fight it, she hissed. It'll look like an accident. An old man losing his balance in a boat. No one will suspect anything strange. Except for the fact that I've been on the water for 30 years and know how to keep my balance on deck, I replied, keeping my eyes on her. Except for the fact that I'm a former marine safety inspector who can't easily be drowned. But you're an old man, Yolanda objected, taking another step toward me. Old men fall. Old men drown, especially when there's no one around to help. She lunged forward again, but this time I was ready. I stepped aside and put my foot out. Yolanda stumbled and fell to the deck, hitting her chin. A thin trickle of blood ran from her lip. Stop it, I said firmly. We're going back to shore, and you're going to give me everything you took from my safe. After that, I want you to stay away from me. Yolanda slowly rose to her feet, wiping the blood from her chin. There was pure hatred in her eyes. You were always so cocky, she said through gritted teeth. You always thought you knew everything better than everyone else, that no one could trick you or outsmart you. But you know what? You didn't even notice when I switched your blood pressure pills for pacifiers. For 3 months, you took chalk instead of medicine. That explains the headaches and the blood pressure spikes I've been experiencing lately. I thought it was age, but it turns out it was sabotage. Why? I asked, trying to understand the logic behind her actions. To make you seem inadequate, she replied with a wry smile. To make your doctor notice your deterioration, to make it easier to prove your incapacity. I shook my head, amazed at the depth of her calculation and cruelty. You'd let me die of a stroke for money? Chino. Don't be dramatic, she snorted. I was in control of the situation. In case of a serious deterioration, I would have returned the real pills. But that wasn't necessary. Your health was too good. I was silent, trying to realize that my own daughter, flesh and blood, could have planned my slow murder for the sake of an inheritance. Your mother would be horrified, I said at last. Don't you dare talk about her, Yolanda shouted, lunging at me again. This time she took me by surprise. Her body slammed into my chest, knocking the air out of my lungs. I staggered, trying to keep my balance, but my heels were already on the edge of the board. Yolanda saw this and kept pushing, putting all her weight into the push. I felt the railing slam into my lower back as my legs lost their footing. Say hello to the sharks, Yolanda shouted as she made the final push. I tumbled over the side and fell into the water. The impact with the surface knocked the rest of the air out of me, and for a moment I was plunged into icy darkness. Then survival instinct took over, and I surfaced, gulping greedily for air. The boat was already pulling away. Yolanda was standing at the helm, looking at me over her shoulder. I saw her face, no regret, no uncertainty, only the cold satisfaction of a man who had gotten rid of a useless thing. Goodbye, Daddy. Her voice came to me before the engine kicked into full gear and the boat sped away, leaving only a trail of foam on the ocean surface. I was alone in the middle of the vast blue. There was no shore in sight, only sky and water to the horizon. I swam in the direction I remembered land to be, but quickly realized that I would run out of energy before I reached land. I needed to conserve energy and utilize the knowledge I had accumulated from years of service. The first thing I did was get rid of my shoes. They were only dragging me down, making it hard to stay afloat. Then I took off my shirt and tied its sleeves, creating a makeshift life preserver. Filling it with air gave me a float that helped me stay on the surface without constant effort. After assessing the situation, I remembered the map of currents in the area. We had sailed about 5 miles from shore, maybe a little more. At this time of year, the main current runs parallel to the shore from north to south, but there is also a weaker countercurrent closer to the surface, pointing toward the shore. If I can catch it and let myself be carried, I have a chance. I lay on my back, using a makeshift float to keep my head above water, and let the current carry me. My thoughts flitted between survival tactics and the realization of betrayal. My own daughter was trying to kill me. My own flesh and blood wanted me dead for money. The thought hurt worse than the cold of the ocean water or the fatigue in my muscles. An hour passed, maybe two. It was hard to judge time on the open sea. The sun began to slip toward the horizon, and I realized that at night my chances of escape would diminish dramatically. I had to speed up. I started paddling, trying to move at an angle to the current to harness its force rather than fight it. After about an hour of paddling like this, I felt the current change. The water was getting warmer, a sign that I was getting closer to shore. Encouraged, I redoubled my efforts, ignoring the fatigue and cramping in my muscles. When the sun was almost touching the horizon, I saw a thin strip of land in the distance, the shore. But joy was quickly replaced by anxiety. Judging by the configuration of the coastline, I was far south of the port we had sailed from. I was at a deserted stretch of beach, where the high cliffs came almost to the water. But there was no choice. I had to get out of the water before dark. Gathering my last strength, I swam toward the shore, trying to choose a place where the waves were breaking not on the rocks, but on the sandy shoal. The last meters were the most difficult. The surf picked me up and threw me into the shallow water with such force that I was out of breath. Sand and pebbles scratched my skin. Salt water stung my eyes, and many small cuts from contact with the rocks. But I was alive. I made it out of the ocean. Lying on the sand, breathing heavily, I tried to gather my strength for the next step. I needed to find people, a phone, any way to communicate with the outside world, and I needed to get home before Yolanda did. A tracker. I remembered the GPS tracker Bart had given me. Fumbling for the waistband of my shorts, I was relieved to find the little device still there, protected by a waterproof case. Now I needed the phone to check my exact location. Struggling to get to my feet, I looked around. The shore was deserted, but in the distance, at the top of one of the hills, I could see a house. It was at least a kilometer away, and it was up a steep slope, but I had no other choice. Slowly, stumbling and stopping often to catch my breath, I began the climb. My muscles burned with fatigue, my side ached, my mouth was dry from thirst and salt water. But I kept going, thinking only that I had to get ahead of Yolanda. I had to be home when she returned, certain of my death. When I finally reached the house on the hill, the sun had already disappeared over the horizon, and dusk was enveloping the coast. It turned out to be the summer residence of some rich man, a large modern house with panoramic windows overlooking the ocean. I went to the door and rang the bell, mentally preparing to explain my appearance. Wet shorts, no shirt or shoes, scratched skin. The door was opened by a man in his 50s wearing an expensive tracksuit. His eyes widened in surprise at the sight of me. "Jesus, what happened to you?" "The boat capsized," I said in a thirsty, hoarse voice. "I need a phone, and a glass of water if you could." The man let me into the house, quickly led me into the kitchen, and poured water from the filter. I drank the first glass almost in one gulp, almost choking, then the second, more slowly. "You need to go to the hospital," he said, sizing me up. "You could be seriously injured." "There's no time," I replied. "I need to get back to Costa Mesa as soon as possible. It's a matter of life and death." He looked at me questioningly, but didn't argue. "You can use my phone, and I think I can lend you some clothes and shoes." I nodded gratefully and took the offered phone. The first thing I did was check the app associated with the GPS tracker. As I suspected, the current had carried me south of Costa Mesa, to the area of the small beach town of Laguna Beach. Then I called Bart. He answered after the second ring, his voice sounding concerned. "Whitney, is that you? Tracker says you're in the ocean." I was in the ocean, I corrected him. Now I'm ashore. Bart, I need your help. Right now. I explained the situation briefly without going into details about Yolanda's betrayal. Just said I'd fallen overboard and I needed to get home right away. Bart, bless his heart, didn't ask too many questions. I'll be at your place in 20 minutes, he said. Hang in there. After the call, the owner of the house, who introduced himself as Nate Hornby, offered to let me use the shower and change into his clothes. I gratefully accepted the offer. The hot water washed away the salt and sand, and the clean clothes, though a little big, were a real relief after hours spent in wet shorts. When Bart arrived, I felt almost human. I thanked Nate for his help, promising to return the clothes and thank him somehow later, and got into my friend's car. You look like you've come back from the dead, Bart said as I pulled onto the main road. Close, I said, looking out the window at the passing lights. You want to tell me what happened? I shook my head. Not yet, no. I need to get home first. As soon as possible. Bart nodded and picked up the pace. He knew me well enough not to insist on an explanation. Is there anything else I can do to help? I hesitated. I needed money. Cash I could use without leaving a trail. Luckily, I had something saved for just such occasions. Yes, I said. Take me to the mini warehouse on Baker Street. Bart raised his eyebrows in surprise, but again, he didn't ask any questions. The mini warehouse was one of those anonymous places where people stored things that didn't fit in their homes, but that they weren't ready to part with. I'd been renting the small bay for 15 years, ever since I realized that Yolanda wasn't as reliable as I would have liked. There I kept duplicates of important documents, old photo albums, and a safe with cash. The rainy day I'd always feared, but hoped not to see. We stopped at the warehouse gate and I entered the access code. The security grill lifted and we drove into the area. My compartment was at the far end of the row, number 42, the year of Anna's birth. Opening the door with my key, I stepped inside. Everything was exactly as I had left it on my last visit 6 months ago. I quickly found the safe hidden behind a stack of old magazines, entered the combination, and pulled out a wad of $100 bills. I didn't know you had a secret stash, Bart said, watching me. I hoped I'd never need it, I replied, tucking the money into the pocket of my borrowed pants. Now to the house. I need to be there before Yolanda gets back. Getting back to the house unnoticed was harder than I thought. There were no lights on when we pulled up, but Yolanda's silver Ford was already in the driveway. She was back sooner than I'd expected. Plan B, I muttered, gesturing for Bart to drive past. What's Plan B? He asked, turning the corner. I don't know yet, I answered honestly. But I'll figure something out. We stopped a couple blocks from my house and I explained what I needed. He listened without interrupting and only finally asked, Are you sure you don't want to just go to the police? Not yet, I shook my head. I want to talk to my daughter first, face to face. Bart sighed but agreed to help. He left me at a small motel on the outskirts of town, where I rented a room for cash using an assumed name. Before leaving, Bart promised to return in the morning with clean clothes in my size and everything I needed for the next phase of the plan. Left alone, I took another shower and collapsed onto the bed, feeling the fatigue finally taking its toll. But before I fell asleep, I pulled out my spare cell phone, which had miraculously survived the ocean dive thanks to its waterproof pouch, and sent a text to Yolanda's number. We're not done yet, then turned off the phone and let myself fall into slumber. Tomorrow would be a new day, the day my daughter would realize she'd underestimated the old man she tried to drown. The morning greeted me with a headache and aching muscles. Every movement felt sore, a reminder of the hours I'd spent in the ocean. I took a hot shower, trying to warm up my stiff joints, and only then did I feel a little better. Waiting on the nightstand was the new cell phone Bart had brought me early that morning while I was still asleep. There was a note next to it that said, Call me when you wake up. I dialed Bart's number, which I knew by heart. How are you feeling, old seawolf? He asked me instead of greeting me. Like I've been dragged under a keel, I answered honestly. But I'm all right. What about your clothes? Everything's in the car and something else you asked for. That's great. Can you come over? I'll be there in 15 minutes. I hung up the phone and sat on the bed, thinking about a plan. I needed to find out what was going on in my house without attracting Yolanda's attention. And I needed proof of her intentions, something more substantial than a father's word against his daughters. Bart arrived exactly 15 minutes later, as promised. His SUV was filled with bags of clothes, shoes, and a few of the tech gadgets I'd asked him to get. "Are you sure you want to do this on your own?" Bart asked as I changed into a new pair of jeans and shirt. "Maybe the police after all." I shook my head. "Not yet, no. First I want to see how far she's willing to go and gather evidence." Bart sighed. "Okay, but be careful. If your daughter was really trying to," he stammered, not wanting to say it out loud. "Kill me?" I finished it for him. "Yes, she did. And I want to know what she's doing thinking she succeeded." We drove to my house but stopped a block before it. I had to walk the rest of the way so as not to attract the attention of neighbors who might recognize my car or Bart's. "Call me if you need help," Bart said, handing me my backpack of equipment. "I'll be in the neighborhood." I nodded and moved toward my house, trying to walk stealthily, keeping to the shade of the trees. It was around 11 in the morning. Most of the neighbors were at work, and the streets were empty. When I reached the back of my property, I stopped at the hedge that separated my garden from the neighbors. From here, I had a good view of the backyard and terrace. Through the gaps in the bushes, I could see that there was someone on the terrace. Not just Yolanda, but other people. I pulled a small pair of binoculars out of my backpack and pointed them at the group. Yolanda was sitting in my favorite chair, dressed in all black, a dress of austere cut, like a funeral. Next to her were my sister Edith and her husband Ronald, whom I hadn't seen in years after a fight over our parents' inheritance. The third person was a man in a suit I didn't know, judging by the file folder and businesslike appearance, some kind of lawyer. I turned on the directional microphone Bart had gotten for me and pointed it at the group. The sound quality wasn't perfect, but it was good enough to make out the conversation. "Officially declaring a death can take time," the man in the suit said. "It usually takes 7 years for a missing person to be declared dead. But in your case, given the circumstances of the disappearance and witness testimony, the process can be expedited." "7 years," Yolanda exclaimed. "That's unacceptable. We have witnesses who saw his boat capsize, and we know there were sharks in the area." So she made up the story about the boat capsizing, and somehow she found witnesses. I wonder how much she paid them. "I understand your impatience, Miss Tuttle," the lawyer replied, "but the law is the law. However, we can begin the estate administration proceedings as the trustee named in Mr. Tuttle's documents." "Papers? What documents?" "I never appointed Yolanda as trustee. Apparently she forged my signature or found another way around the law." "What about the insurance?" Edith asked. Her voice, unlike in previous years, sounded greedy rather than concerned. "It's a decent sum, isn't it?" Yolanda nodded. 300,000, but you need a death certificate to get the insurance too. "We can apply for payment based on the presumption of accidental death," the lawyer said. "So, Mom, given the evidence and the absence of a body, the insurance company may agree to pay out before the court officially recognizes the death." My sister and Yolanda exchanged satisfied glances. They'd never gotten along particularly well, but apparently the prospect of splitting my money had brought them closer together. "What about the funeral?" Ronald asked. "Without a body, will it just be a memorial service?" "Yes," replied Yolanda. "I've already spoken to the church. They can hold a service this Friday. I thought it would be best not to delay. The sooner we have the ceremony, the sooner we can move on." "Move on?" Interesting euphemism for starting to spend my money. "What about the house?" Edith asked, looking around with undisguised envy. "Are you going to live here?" "For now, yes," answered Yolanda. "Then maybe I'll sell it. There are too many memories. Painful memories of the man she tried to kill? Or is it just old-fashioned for her taste?" I felt anger building up inside, but forced myself to breathe steady. Now was not the time for emotion. "If I may, I suggest we start with a property inventory," the lawyer said, opening the folder, "to make sure everything is in accordance with the law." "Of course," Yolanda nodded. "I've already started. Most of the things are of no value. Old furniture, books. But there are some interesting things." She stood up and led the group into the house. I couldn't hear their conversation anymore, but I realized they were off to look through my things, to appraise my possessions, to divide what I'd saved up all my life. I retreated into the shade of the trees and walked around the house, keeping my distance. I needed to find a new vantage point. There was a small window in the side of the house that overlooked the study. If they went in there, I could see and hear what was going on. Reaching the window, I cautiously peered out from behind the bush. The study was empty, but there were voices coming from the hallway. They were getting closer. I set up the microphone and prepared to listen. The first to enter the office was Yolanda, followed by the lawyer and my sister and her husband. Yolanda went straight to the bookcase. "Here behind this book is the safe," she said, pushing aside a volume of the Naval Encyclopedia. "I've already checked its contents. There was some jewelry in there, but I moved it to a safety deposit box. Transferred. Another euphemism for theft." "Reasonable," the lawyer nodded. "And the documents?" "Here." Yolanda took a folder out of the safe and put it on the table. "All the important papers." The lawyer began to look through the documents, occasionally making notes in his notebook. "Everything is in order," he said at last. "The will is correct, and you are named as the sole heir to the entire estate, including the house, car, and all financial assets." "And the power of attorney?" Yolanda asked. "The one I showed you earlier?" Yes, it is also in order, although it is not notarized. But given the circumstances, the court may recognize it as valid." I tensed up. "A power of attorney? I never signed any power of attorney in Yolanda's name. It's obviously a forgery." "Great," Yolanda smiled. "So I can start disposing of the property now?" "With some restrictions," the lawyer clarified. "You can manage current accounts, pay bills, maintain the property, but major transactions such as selling the house or withdrawing significant sums from accounts will require additional court authorization." Yolanda nodded, but I noticed her face tense up slightly. Obviously, she expected to have full control of my money immediately. "Shilmarim." "Well," Edith said, looking around the office, "we can help you sort through your things. Some of it can be given to charity. Some of it can be sold." "Thank you for the offer, Aunt Edith," Yolanda replied with a fake smile. "But I would rather do it myself. It helps me deal with my grief." Grief. Another word that sounded mocking in the mouth of a woman who had pushed her own father over the side of a boat. "Of course, dear," Edith nodded, but I could see the disappointment in her eyes. Evidently, she had expected to carry away something valuable under the pretense of helping. "If I may," interposed the lawyer, "I'd like to take a look at the rest of the house to make a preliminary inventory of the property." They left the office, and I stopped hearing their conversation. But I had seen enough. Yolanda really believed I was dead and had already begun the process of appropriating my property. She had forged a power of attorney, probably other documents as well. She was planning a funeral, a farce designed to convince everyone I was dead and to expedite the money. I backed away from the window and returned to the hedge. I needed to think about the next step. I could go to the police right now, but I had no hard evidence of attempted murder. Just my word against Yolanda's. And with the forged power of attorney, she could claim that I had given her the authority to dispose of the property myself and had simply forgotten about it because of my age. No, I had to catch her red-handed, make her confess to what she'd done, and I had a plan to make that happen. I waited for the lawyer, Edith, and Ronald to leave, leaving Yolanda alone in the house. Then I returned to Bart's car, who was patiently waiting for me at the agreed location. "Well, how was the reconnaissance?" he asked me as I got into the car. "Worse than I thought," I said, and told him everything I'd seen and heard. "She's already planning my funeral, Bart, and she's forged the documents that entitle her to my estate." Bart whistled. "That's some serious scope. What are you going to do?" "First, I need to get into the house when Yolanda's gone, install some equipment, and then I'll give her a surprise she'll never forget." We continued watching the house until evening. Around 6 o'clock, Yolanda came out, got in her Ford, and drove away. This was my chance. "Let's go," I said to Bart. "Hurry up." We pulled up to the back of the house where the neighbors couldn't see us. I pulled out the spare key I kept in a stash under a rock in the garden and unlocked the back door. Entering my house as a thief, I had a strange feeling. Everything looked familiar, yet foreign at the same time. Yolanda had already started to make changes. She had rearranged the furniture in the living room, removed some pictures from the walls, and replaced the curtains. "Let's move fast," I said to Bart. "We have an hour tops." We split up. Bart went to set up small cameras in the living room and study, while I went into my bedroom and kitchen. The cameras were wireless and small enough to be hard to see. They transmitted the images to a special app on my phone, allowing me to watch what was going on in the house in real time. After installing the cameras, I began the second part of the plan. From a hiding place in the basement that Yolanda didn't know about, I got an old laptop and some flash drives. They contained copies of all the important documents and photos of valuable items that had been in the safe before the theft. There was also the CCTV footage I had installed after my first suspicions of my daughter's dishonesty. One of them clearly showed Yolanda opening the safe and taking the jewelry. I transferred all the files to the new laptop Bart had bought and created a presentation, a kind of dossier on my own daughter. Her every move, every lie, every theft. It was all documented. "It's done," Bart said, back in the basement. "The cameras are up and running." "What else?" I showed him the presentation I'd prepared. "All that's left is to print it out and put it in the right order." "Are you really going to do that?" Bart asked, looking at the screen. "That's tough, Whitney. She tried to kill me, Bart," I reminded him. "She deserves the truth." We finished cooking in 40 minutes. Everything was ready for tomorrow, the day Yolanda would realize her plan had failed. Before I left one detail that was going to throw my daughter into turmoil. On the kitchen table, I put my old watch, the same one I always wore to work, a clock that Yolanda knew well. They ticked away, counting down the time until our next meeting. We left the house as quietly as we had entered. Now all we could do was wait and watch. Back at the motel, I connected to the cameras through the app. Just in time, Yolanda came home. I saw her walk into the living room carrying bags from the store. Apparently, she'd done some shopping on my dime. She walked to the kitchen and I tensed, waiting for her reaction to the clock. The kitchen camera showed Yolanda stiffening when she saw them on the table. Her face went pale and the bags fell out of her hands. "This is impossible," she whispered as she approached the table. "It can't be." She touched the clock gingerly, as if afraid of burning herself. Then she pulled her hand away sharply and looked around, as if expecting to see a ghost. Her fear was almost palpable. "This is some kind of joke," she said louder, as if addressing someone. "A very bad joke." She picked up the watch and examined it closely. It was indeed my watch with a small engraving on the back, the date Anna had given it to me for our 10th anniversary. Yolanda sank down in her chair, still holding the watch in her hand. Her self-confidence evaporated, leaving only fear and confusion. "Papa," she called out in a trembling voice. "Are you there?" No one answered. Only the ticking of the clock broke the silence. Yolanda stood up, put the clock on the table, and quickly left the kitchen. The cameras showed her checking every room in the house, looking under beds, in closets, even behind curtains, like a scared child afraid of monsters in the dark. Finding no one, she returned to the kitchen, poured herself a large glass of wine, and drank it almost in one gulp. Then she poured another and called someone. "Aunt Edith, it's me. Can you come over?" Her voice sounded tense. "No, it's nothing urgent. It's just, I found something strange. Dad's watch. Yeah, the same one. It was just sitting on the table, even though it wasn't there when I left." "No, I'm not crazy." She was almost screaming. "Come here, please. I'm afraid to be alone." After the call, Yolanda drank her third glass of wine and stared at the clock as if it could answer her questions. Her hands trembled, and a look of terror froze on her face. "It's impossible," she repeated. "He's dead. I saw him drowning." I turned off the sound, not wanting to hear any more. My daughter was sure she'd killed me, and now she was afraid I'd come back from the other side of the world to haunt her. Fear was a good start, but it was only the beginning. That night, when Yolanda finally fell asleep after taking a sleeping pill, I broke into the house again. Edith, who had come at her call, had long since left, convincing myself and my niece that the clock had probably been in the house all the time, just that Yolanda hadn't noticed it because of the stress. I moved silently, aware of every creaking doormat in my house. The first thing I did was go to the study and retrieve the fake power of attorney from the file folder. Then I went to Yolanda's bedroom. She was sleeping restlessly, frowning in her sleep. Next to the bed was an empty bottle of wine and a packet of sleeping pills. On the bedside table was my watch. She must have taken it from the kitchen, not wanting to leave it unattended. I carefully took the watch and put an envelope in its place. It contained a photograph of Yolanda opening the safe and taking the jewelry. On the back of the photograph, I wrote, "I saw the whole thing." Then I went back to the living room and began my preparations for tomorrow. In the center of the room, I placed a chair, my favorite chair, in which Yolanda had sat today while planning my funeral. I placed a small table next to the chair, and on it I placed the evidence folder and the laptop with the presentation open. I set everything up so that when Yolanda entered the room, she would immediately see the chair, the table, and the folder. This was to be the scene for our last meeting. After finishing the preparations, I checked the cameras once more. Everything was working. Now all I had to do was wait until morning and return to take my place in the chair before Yolanda woke up. As I left the house, I paused for a moment at the picture of Anna standing on the mantel. Her smile, captured in the photo, was full of warmth and love. I wondered what she would say now. Would she approve of my plan? Would she ask me to forgive our daughter? I didn't know, but I knew I couldn't forgive the attempted murder. I couldn't forgive the betrayal and the lies. I couldn't let Yolanda get away with it just because she's my daughter. Tomorrow she'll know what it means to underestimate an old sea wolf. Tomorrow she'll realize that some actions have consequences that can't be bought off or escaped. I walked out of the house, closing the door quietly behind me, and disappeared into the night. It was a few hours before dawn. Morning came ruthlessly early. I woke up in the motel before dawn, feeling every year of my age and every bruise from my struggle to live in the ocean. My body ached, but my mind was clearer than ever. I took a long, hot shower, shaved, and put on the fresh clothes Bart had brought. Black pants, white shirt, navy blue jacket. Clothes that made me look more formal than usual. I wasn't just a father today. I was a judge. "Are you sure you can handle this on your own?" Bart asked when we met in his car. "I could go with you." I shook my head. "This would have to be between me and her. Just between us." Bart didn't argue. He drove me to the corner of my street and stopped. "I'll wait for your call," he said. "Don't do anything irreversible." I nodded, knowing what he was worried about. Bart was afraid that my anger and sense of betrayal might push me to something extreme. But I wasn't going to stoop to Yolanda's level. I wanted justice, not revenge. I walked home, trying not to be seen by the neighbors. It was early morning, about 6:30, and most of the houses on the street were still asleep. The fresh morning air filled my lungs, bringing with it the smell of the ocean. My ocean that couldn't kill me, despite my daughter's best efforts. I entered through the back door, using the spare key. The house was quiet. Checking the cameras on my phone, I made sure Yolanda was still asleep in her room. After last night's bottle of wine and sleeping pills, she would probably sleep until late morning. I had plenty of time to finalize my arrangements. I walked through to the living room where I had set the stage for our meeting yesterday. Everything was in place. My chair in the center of the room, the table with the evidence folder and laptop, the old nautical clock on the mantel ticking like a metronome. I sat down in the chair and opened the folder. It contained photos of the stolen jewelry, copies of bank statements showing unauthorized withdrawals from my accounts, printouts of Yolanda's messages to some people about planning an accident on the boat. All of this I'd been collecting for months, sensing something was wrong, but not wanting to believe my daughter was capable of such a betrayal. Next to the folder lay a notebook with an open presentation. The first slide contained the simple caption, "The Truth About Yolanda Tuttle." I checked that the video from the cameras in the boat was also ready to play. Yes, everything was in place. Time was running out. I sat motionless, immersed in memories of the past, of a time when Yolanda was a little girl with bright eyes and a ringing laugh, when she looked at me with adoration instead of calculating coldness. Where and when did we lose that connection? When did my daughter turn into a woman capable of pushing her own father into the ocean and floating away quietly? Maybe Anna was right. Maybe I was too strict, too demanding, too emotionally unavailable. Maybe I had created this monster with my own hands, with my neglect and coldness. But whatever my mistakes as a father, they didn't justify attempted murder, didn't justify stealing and lying, nor did they justify betrayal. Around 9 a.m., I heard footsteps on the stairs. Yolanda was awake. I straightened up in my chair and got ready. My heart beat steady. My hands were calm. I felt no fear, only determination. A few minutes later, I heard Yolanda enter the kitchen. The sound of the refrigerator opening, the noise of the coffee maker. Then silence, interrupted only by sips of coffee. I imagined her sitting at the kitchen table, planning her day, the day she considered the first day of her new life. A life without me. Finally, I heard her footsteps approaching the living room. I turned off the lights with the remote, plunging the room into semi-darkness despite the morning sun outside the window. The curtains were drawn tightly. Yolanda entered the living room, holding a cup of coffee in her hand. She was wearing a silk robe, a new one, probably bought with my money by the look of it. She didn't immediately notice me in the darkness, heading to the window to open the curtains. I pressed a button on the remote, and the lights came on. Yolanda froze in place, hesitating to turn around, as if she knew what she would see. "Good morning, Yolanda," I said in a calm voice. The cup fell out of her hand, shattering on the floor. The coffee spilled in a dark puddle on the light-colored carpet, but neither she nor I noticed. Slowly, as if in a nightmare, Yolanda turned around. Her face was white as chalk, her eyes widened with horror. She opened her mouth but couldn't utter a sound. "You look like you've seen a ghost," I said, not moving. "But as you can see, I'm quite material." It's impossible," she whispered at last. "Shoko, you can't be here. You drowned." "Tried to drown," I corrected. "But you see, your old man knows the sea too well to let it take him, especially when he was pushed off the boat by his own hands." Yolanda shook her head as if trying to banish a vision. "You're not real. This is a hallucination. From stress. From the wine and the pills." I got up from the chair and took a step toward her. She recoiled, backing up against the wall. "I'm quite real, Yolanda. As real as your attempted murder. As real as the jewelry you stole. As real as the forged documents you prepared." Her eyes darted to the door, assessing the distance and the chances of escape. I shook my head. "You shouldn't. We should finish our conversation. We have a lot to discuss." "I don't have anything to discuss with you," she said, finding her voice. "You should be dead." "Disappointed?" I asked with a bitter chuckle. "I'm sorry to ruin your plans for my inheritance." "Speaking of plans," I pointed to the chair across from me. "Have a seat. I have something for you." She didn't move, as if frozen in place. Her eyes darted between me and the door like a hunted animal. "Yolanda," I said more firmly, "sit down, now." Something in my tone, an echo of the paternal authority she had once feared and respected, made her obey. She walked slowly on stiff legs to the chair and sat down, keeping as much distance between us as possible. I returned to my chair and opened the folder. "Do you know what this is?" I asked, showing her the first picture. It was of Yolanda opening my safe. The date in the corner of the picture was clear, 3 weeks ago. She was silent, looking at the image with a mixture of fear and stubbornness. "It was taken with a camera I installed after I noticed some of my things were missing," I explained. "You see, I'm not as naive as you think, and not as helpless." I flipped the photo over, revealing the next one. It showed Yolanda standing at my desk, looking through documents. "And this is you studying my will. Interesting, isn't it? To know how much you'll get when I die." Yolanda remained silent, but her hands resting on the armrests of the chair clenched into fists. "And this is particularly interesting," I continued, showing the next picture. Yolanda was talking to a man on the wharf, handing him an envelope. "That's Lester Crane, a local alcoholic who, for $50, would swear he saw my boat capsize. You're witness, right?" Her face twitched, but she still remained silent. "I could go on," I said, "but I think you get the point. I have proof of everything you've done, every step of your plan to kill me, every stolen item, every lie." I closed the folder and put my hand on the laptop. "But the most interesting part is in here. Do you want to see it?" Without waiting for an answer, I turned the screen toward her and pressed the play button. The video from the camera installed in the boat appeared on the screen. The quality wasn't perfect, but it was good enough to make out our faces and hear the conversation. The moment Yolanda pushed me overboard was captured in great detail, including her last words, "Say hello to the sharks." Yolanda stared at the screen as if hypnotized. Her face grew paler and paler until it turned ash-colored. "From where? Dash," she whispered. It couldn't be. There were no cameras on the boat. "There were," I answered. "Small, discreet ones. I installed them when I checked the boat before we left. It's an old safety inspector's habit to always check the equipment." The video ended and I closed the laptop. "Now, do you realize the position you're in?" I asked. "All this evidence I can turn over to the police, right now, and you'll be arrested for attempted murder. Do you know how many years you get for that? For the first time since we started talking, I saw in her eyes not only fear, but a realization of the consequences of my actions. What? What are you going to do? She asked in a shaky voice. That's a good question, I answered. What would you do if you were me? I don't know, she whispered. Of course you do, I objected. You'd send me to prison, or maybe you'd just get rid of me in a more permanent way. Again, Yolanda flinched as if struck. Daddy, I didn't mean... It wasn't like that. I didn't think... Don't lie, I cut her off. Don't make your situation worse with another lie. I saw your face when you pushed me. I heard your voice. You knew exactly what you were doing. She lowered her head, and I saw tears drip down her clenched hands. Real tears, or just another performance? With Yolanda, one could never be sure. Why? I asked, lowering my voice. That's the one thing I don't understand. Why did you want me dead so badly? Was it the money? Because of the house? Or was it revenge for something? Yolanda raised her head. Her eyes were red from crying, but her gaze suddenly became hard. You really don't understand, she asked. After everything, enlighten me. She took a deep breath, as if gathering her strength. You never loved me, she said with sudden bitterness. Never. For you, I was always an obligation, a burden, not a daughter, but a problem to be solved. You were so busy saving other people's lives that you didn't realize you'd ruined mine. That's not... No, listen to me, she interrupted me, suddenly raising her voice. All my childhood, I tried to earn your love, your approval. I studied hard, participated in all the activities you mentioned, but you were never there for me. Never. And when you were home, you looked right through me like I was a ghost, invisible. She wiped her tears with the back of her hand. And then Mom died, the only person who really loved me. And what did you do? Shut down even more. You pushed me away when I needed you the most, when we could have been grieving together, helping each other. You just disappeared. Physically, you were here, but emotionally, you were thousands of miles away. There was a bit of truth in what she said that I couldn't deny. After Anna's death, I really pulled away from everyone, including my daughter, immersed in my own pain, oblivious to her suffering. And you decided that murder was the answer? I asked quietly. That my death would fix something? I didn't plan it, she replied, lowering her gaze. Not at first. At first, I just wanted something from you. Some kind of compensation for all those years of neglect. Mom's jewelry that you hid in the safe instead of giving to me. The money you refused to give me when I really needed help. The house you lived in alone, even though it was too big for one person. She paused, wiping away new tears. And then, when I saw how easily you noticed things missing, how easily you blocked the card, I realized that you would never let me get what I deserved. That as long as you were alive, I would always be a beggar, always struggling to survive while you sat in your big house overlooking the ocean. And that's when you decided to kill me, I finished for her. She didn't answer, but her silence was eloquent enough. You know what the saddest part is, Yolanda? I said after a long pause. You could have just talked to me, told me how you felt, asked for help. I would have listened. I might not have understood right away, but I would have listened. You never listened, she countered. Never. Maybe, I agreed. But we'll never know now, will we? Because you chose violence over conversation, betrayal over honesty, and that choice changed everything between us. Forever. I stood up, gathering my folder and laptop. What now? She asked, looking up at me. Are you going to call the police? I shook my head. No, not today. Maybe never. Not because you don't deserve it, but because I don't want your mother's memory to be tainted by scandal. She loved you in spite of everything. And part of me, despite your betrayal, still remembers the little girl who was once my daughter. I took a step toward the door, then stopped and turned to her one last time. I have something for you, I said, pulling an envelope from the inside pocket of my jacket. It's a new will. I made it yesterday. It disinherits you. All my property after my death will go to a charitable fund to help the families of dead sailors. I think your mother would like that. I put the envelope on the table next to her. You have 24 hours to pack your things and leave this house. Anything you stole, jewelry, money, you can keep. Think of it as severance pay. The last thing you'll ever get from me. Daddy, please. She started, but I raised my hand to stop her. I'm not your father anymore, Yolanda. You lost the right to call me that the moment you decided my death was worth your gain. From that moment on, we are strangers. Her face contorted in pain. Real or feigned, I couldn't tell. What am I supposed to do now? Where do I go? That's your problem, I said. You're a grown woman. You can solve them yourself. Without my help, without my money, without my name. I turned and headed for the door. Behind me, I heard her sobbing. Loud, desperate sobs. But I didn't stop. I didn't turn around. Tears couldn't change anything between us. On the doorstep, I said without turning around, "Goodbye, Yolanda. I hope someday you'll realize what you've done, and maybe find a way to live with it." I walked out of the house, closing the door behind me. The sun was shining brightly, the sky was cloudless, the ocean in the distance glistened like molten silver. The world continued to exist, even though my life had just changed forever. I no longer had a daughter, only the memory of a child I once loved and perhaps didn't show that love enough, and the memory of the woman who tried to kill me. I took a deep breath of sea air and walked forward without looking back. A new life was ahead of me, lonely but free of betrayal and lies. A life I wasn't supposed to live, but was given as a gift by an ocean that refused to accept me. 6 months had passed since our last meeting with Yolanda. 6 months of a new life that began the moment I closed the door behind me and crossed my daughter out of my heart. At least that's what I tried to convince myself. The house stayed with me, though it wasn't easy to be in it at first. Every room held memories, not just of Yolanda's betrayal, but of the happy days when Anna was alive and our daughter was still an innocent child. I even considered selling, but in the end I decided to stay. It was my home and I wasn't going to let the ghosts of the past kick me out of it. Yolanda disappeared from Costa Mesa just as I had demanded. That day she actually packed her things and left without making any further attempt to talk to me or change my mind. Neighbors saw her loading her suitcases into her silver Ford, swallowing tears and avoiding eye contact with curious onlookers. By evening she was out of town. I learned from mutual acquaintances that she had moved to San Diego, where she had found a job with another pest control company. She never told anyone about what had happened between us. All she told everyone was that we'd had a falling out over an inheritance and she'd decided to start her life over, away from her father. Lying to the end was her way. As for me, I wasn't in a hurry to share the truth either. When neighbors or acquaintances asked about Yolanda, I told them that she had decided to move away and we no longer kept in touch. Most people thought it was just a family spat, and no one realized the true depth of the gulf that separated us. In the first weeks after she left, I often woke up at night, haunted by nightmares of dark water and a boat sailing away. I relived over and over again the moment of the fall, the cold of the ocean, the struggle to live. But over time, the nightmares became less frequent and then stopped altogether. The ocean, which should have been my grave, became a source of peace for me again. I began to go to the shore regularly, sometimes even renting a boat for fishing. The sea held no grudge against me, unlike my daughter. The hardest part for me was recognizing my own role in everything that had happened. Yes, Yolanda had done the unforgivable, but I couldn't deny that her words about my emotional absence and neglect contained a grain of truth. I was a father who provided for a child's physical needs, but not their emotional needs. I gave Yolanda a roof over her head, food, and education, but I didn't give her what she really needed: attention, acceptance, expressed love. After much deliberation, I made an appointment with a psychologist for counseling, something I had never done before. Dr. Eleanor Fisher, a woman about my age with kind eyes and a penetrating gaze, helped me to understand my own feelings and actions. I didn't tell her the whole truth about the attempted murder, but I did share my story of betrayal and broken relationship with my daughter. "You know, Whitney," she said after a few sessions, "many fathers of your generation grew up believing that their primary role was to be the provider and protector. The emotional side of parenting was seen as a woman's responsibility. That doesn't excuse your daughter's actions, but it may help you understand why she felt rejected." I nodded, recognizing the validity of her words. My own father was like that, a stern, reserved man who rarely showed his feelings and believed his duty was done if there was food in the house and the roof didn't leak. I unwittingly repeated his pattern of behavior without thinking about the consequences. What should I do now? I asked. Try to repair the relationship? Dr. Fisher shook her head. That's for you to decide. Sometimes forgiveness is not necessary to repair the relationship, but for your own healing. You can forgive without reestablishing contact, and you can learn from the past even if you can't change it. Her words struck a chord with me. Forgiveness was not for Yolanda, but for myself. I wasn't ready for it. Perhaps I never would be. But the very thought that it was possible brought some relief. Gradually, my life took on a new rhythm and meaning. I began volunteering at a local marine rescue center, where my experience proved invaluable. Twice a week, I taught young lifeguards water safety skills, currents, weather conditions, and rescue techniques. Seeing the interest and respect in the eyes of these young people was surprisingly gratifying. For the first time in a long time, I felt that I was really needed. One day when I was practicing water rescue, I noticed a young man among the students who looked at me with special attention. After class, he came up and introduced himself. Ashton Greer, sir. I wanted to personally thank you for the lesson. You saved my mother's life 15 years ago when their yacht capsized off Cape Catalina. I didn't immediately recall that incident. There had been many rescues during my years of service, faces and names often blending into one, but his sincere gratitude touched me. She always said that if it weren't for you, I wouldn't be alive, Ashton continued. She was 3 months pregnant when it happened. The doctor said hypothermia shock could have caused a miscarriage, but you acted so quickly and professionally that she didn't even get hypothermia. I shook his hand, feeling a lump in my throat. All these years I'd remembered the ones I couldn't save, but I'd forgotten the ones I'd helped. About the lives that lasted because of my actions. About children like Ashton who were born because their mothers survived. I decided to become a lifeguard because of you, he said with a smile. I want to give back. After that meeting, something changed in me. It was as if the weight I carried in my heart became a little lighter. I couldn't undo the past, couldn't bring back the lost years with my daughter or prevent her betrayal. But I could do some good in the here and now. I could pass on my knowledge and experience to those who truly valued it. I could save lives, if not with my own hands, then through those I trained. I sat on the terrace for a long time that night, looking out at the ocean and thinking about Yolanda. Where is she now? Does she regret what she did? Is she thinking about me? Not that it mattered. The bridges had been burned, and neither of us were going to rebuild them. But I couldn't help but wonder about these questions. In the morning, I called my attorney to confirm the changes in my will. All of my assets were indeed to go to a fund to help the families of fallen sailors upon my death. But I added one detail. A small portion of the funds was earmarked for scholarships for young lifeguards. Scholarships in the name of Anna Tuttle, a woman who loved the sea and those who lived near it. Are you sure you don't want to leave something to your daughter? The lawyer asked. Not even a token amount. I'm sure, I answered. Sherbasarniwon, she's already taken hers. 3 more months passed. Spring changed to summer. The beaches of Costa Mesa were filled with vacationers, and my new routine became familiar and comfortable. I did my training, met with friends, and occasionally went out to sea to fish with Bart. Life went on no matter what. And then a letter arrived. No return address, but I recognized Yolanda's handwriting on the envelope. I held it in my hands for a long time, hesitating to open it. Part of me wanted to throw it away without reading it. Another part of me wanted to know what she'd written. In the end, curiosity won out. Inside was a piece of paper and a small key. I recognized it, the key to the safe deposit box where Yolanda kept Anna's stolen jewelry. The letter was short. I don't ask for forgiveness because I know I don't deserve it. Just returning something I should never have taken. It belonged to Mom and now it should go back to you. I haven't touched those things since that day. Yolanda. No apology, no explanation, no plea to restore the relationship. Just an admission of the theft and the return of the stolen goods. It was her style, proud even in defeat, unable to fully admit her guilt or repent. I put the letter in my desk drawer and did nothing for a while. Didn't go to the bank to get the jewelry, didn't answer the letter, didn't try to contact her. Wasn't ready. maybe I never would be. Life, meanwhile, continued to offer surprises. One day, a woman I had never seen before rang the doorbell, tall, with gray hair in a tight bun and a penetrating gaze. "Dash Mr. Tuttle?" she asked. "My name is Veronica Shepherd. I was a friend of your wife's in college." I invited her in, surprised and intrigued. Anna rarely mentioned her college years, and I knew very little about her friends from that period. "I found you through mutual acquaintances," Veronica explained as we sat down in the living room. "I wanted to give you something that belonged to Anna." She pulled a small box from her bag, tied with a ribbon. "These are her college diaries. She left them with me before she transferred to another university. Said she'd pick them up someday, but she never did. And I recently found them while moving and thought you or your daughter might treasure them." I took the box, feeling my fingers trembling slightly. Anna's diaries, a part of her I never knew. "Thank you," I said. "This is unexpected gift." Veronica nodded, as if she understood my feelings. "She wrote about you often, you know, even before you met. She'd seen you on the pier when you were instructing the rookies. Said she'd never met a man with such a pure calling. I didn't know that. Anna never told me she'd noticed me before our first meeting at the bookstore. She was special," Veronica said, standing up, "and she loved you very much. Both of you, you and your daughter." After she left, I sat staring at the box of journals for a long time. Opening them meant letting new pain into my life, memories of the woman I'd lost and the time when our family was still whole. But not opening them meant giving up a part of Anna that I could recognize even after her death. In the end, I made up my mind. The first entry was dated the day Anna first started college. The last was the day before we were married. In between lay years of her life, thoughts, dreams, fears. And in between was the story of our love, seen through her eyes. I read all night, sometimes laughing, sometimes crying, sometimes just stopping to catch my breath. Anna wrote about our first meeting, about her doubts, about how she gradually fell in love with me, about her fears for my safety when I went to sea, about her joy when she found out she was pregnant, her hopes for the future of our family. Among her notes, I found her reflections on parenting. She wrote that she wants to be a mother who is supportive and guiding, but not controlling, that she wants to teach our child independence and kindness, that she hoped I could show our daughter not only discipline and responsibility, but also the tenderness I so rarely showed in public. "Whitney thinks I don't see his gentleness," she wrote, "but I see the way he looks at Yolanda sleeping, the way he strokes her hair when he thinks no one can see. He has so much love in him, but he doesn't know how to express it. I hope in time he will learn." Those words hit me in the heart. Anna saw what I didn't recognize, my inability to express my feelings, my emotional stiffness. And she hoped I would change, but I didn't. I didn't, or didn't want to. In the morning, after a sleepless night with Anna's journals, I made a decision. I couldn't change the past, couldn't undo my mistakes with Yolanda, but I could be a better person now, could learn what I hadn't learned in all these years. Openness, emotional honesty, the ability to express what I felt. I took the safe deposit box key Yolanda had sent me out of the drawer and went to the bank. Anna's jewelry was there, the pearl necklace, the rings, my father's gold watch, all safe and sound, just as Yolanda had written. When I got home, I sat with these things for a long time, remembering the moments associated with each of them. The pearls Anna wore on our rare outings to the opera, the rings that shone on her fingers on special days, the watch my father gave me before he died, saying that time is the most precious gift we can give to those we love. Time. I spent so little time being a real father to Yolanda. So little time to teach her not only discipline and responsibility, but also love and forgiveness and honesty. I couldn't blame her entirely for what I had never taught her. That evening, I wrote 2 letters, one to a fund to help the families of fallen sailors, notifying them of a planned bequest and asking that some of the funds be used for educational programs for children. The second was to Yolanda. I didn't ask her to come back, nor did I offer to repair the relationship. That would have been unfair to both of us. Instead, I simply wrote the truth. That I had read her mother's diaries, that I realized my mistakes as a father, that I regretted not being able to give her what she needed, that Anna's jewelry was safe with me now, that I wasn't ready to forgive the attempted murder, but that I understood the roots of her anger and resentment. At the end of the letter, I added the lines I probably should have said to her years ago. You were always my daughter, and part of me will always love the child you once were. I hope that one day you find the peace with yourself that I have been unable to find for most of my life. Take care of yourself. Whitney, I didn't know if she would ever get that letter, if she would ever read it, if she would ever respond. It didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that I had finally told the truth, to myself and to her, that I'd accepted my part of the responsibility without excusing her actions, that I'd found a way to move on without clinging to bitterness and resentment, but without forgetting what had happened. The next day I mailed a letter to an address in San Diego that I had found through mutual acquaintances. Then I drove to the shore, to the spot where Anna and I had once long ago loved to sit watching the sunset. The waves rolled onto the sand, washing away the traces of the past, leaving a blank canvas for the future. Yolanda didn't answer my letter. I didn't expect a reply. Our paths had parted completely with no hope of reconciliation. But something changed in me. The heaviness I carried in my heart became lighter. It didn't disappear completely. Such wounds never fully heal. But it didn't weigh on me with the same force. I continued my work at the rescue center, finding satisfaction in passing on my experience to the younger generation. Sometimes, looking at my students, I found myself thinking that Yolanda might have been among them if things had turned out differently. If I had been a different father and she a different daughter. But you can't change the past. All that remains is to live on, learning from mistakes and trying not to repeat them. And I lived, day after day, week after week, finding new meaning in helping others, sharing knowledge, being useful. One day, almost a year after my breakup with Yolanda, I was doing water rescue training and noticed a young woman watching us from the pier. Something in her posture, in the tilt of her head, reminded me of Yolanda as a young woman. My heart sank for a moment, but when the woman turned, I saw that it was a different person. Still, that moment made me wonder if someday, many years from now, we might meet Yolanda by chance on the street or on the beach. Would we recognize each other? How will we feel? What would we say? I didn't know the answers to these questions, but I did know that I no longer lived in anticipation of such an encounter, either with fear or hope. I had finally let go of the past, allowed it to be what it was, a story from which lessons were learned, but which no longer defined my present. The ocean taught me that. Every wave is a new beginning. Every low tide carries something away, but every high tide also brings something new. Nothing stays the same, and there is a beauty and wisdom in this constant transformation. I stood on the shore, feeling the sand move away from under my feet with each receding wave, and realized that I had found my path. Not perfect, not free of pain and regret, but authentic. My own path that I'd made day by day, choice by choice. And somewhere far away in San Diego, or even farther away, Yolanda was walking her own path. I hope she too has learned the lessons of our story. I hope she too found a way to live with what she did and what she was made to do. I hope, but I don't expect. I don't demand. I don't insist. We were father and daughter, bound by blood and history. Now we were strangers, separated by an ocean of pain and betrayal. And that ocean was too wide to cross, too deep to see the bottom, too powerful to resist its current. But I survived that ocean once, swam out against all odds, and that was my strength, the ability to survive, to adapt, to find a new path when the old one was lost in the fog. Life went on, my life, without Yolanda, but with the memory of who we once were to each other, with the realization that even the deepest wounds eventually become scars, visible but no longer bleeding, with the wisdom that only the trial of betrayal and loss brings. I made my choice. She made hers. And each of us now lived with the consequences of those choices, in different worlds, under different skies, but under the same sun that illuminates and reveals the truth, no matter how bitter.